Greetings, guest. Welcome to the Patriarchy, where we explore cinema classics fueled by predictive Hollywood programming and unpack how our favorite characters in cinema got egg all over their faces. I am your commentator, Dom, and tonight we're unpacking The Shining. In this video, we are wrapping up spooky season with Stephen King's The Shining. This film was directed by Stanley Kubrick, and the screenplay was co-written by Mr. Kubrick and Diane Johnson, starring a 42-year-old Jack Nicholson as Jack Torrance alongside Shelley Duvall, who plays his wife Wendy, and their son Danny, aka Doc, played by Danny Lloyd. This film follows a family as they assume the role of winter caretakers at the Overlook Hotel. If you're watching this video, I'm assuming that you've seen this Stephen King classic, and there's no need for me to give a play-by-play of the plot. And if you haven't seen The Shining, pause here, go watch it, please, as it's one of Stephen King's biggest hits. This video will focus on Jack Torrance and why his wife Wendy should have left way before they ever stepped foot into the Overlook Hotel. Let's start with an analysis of Jack's wife, Wendy. At the start of the film, we see that Wendy is a stay-at-home mom with a very calm disposition about herself. Although not that traditional 1950s model of a housewife, Wendy seems a bit more rough around the edges. She also seems to be a chronic smoker, but nonetheless very soft-spoken and submissive to Jack. In Stephen King's novel, it's written that Wendy actually had a bad relationship with her own mother, and that her mother was in fact emotionally abusive towards her. We'll put a pin in that fact as we unpack Jack and Wendy's relationship. Her husband, Jack, on the other hand, is a former school teacher turned writer who has struggled with alcoholism. I struggled for some time to find words to describe Jack. Let's just call him self-centered and a bit of a jack, if that can be a personality type. So for this monologue, we're going to be focusing on the first 23 minutes of the film before the family even steps foot into the Overlook Hotel, and go over why Wendy should have left Jack long before they arrived at this haunted nightmare. This can be summed up in 3 points. 1, Jack's selfishness. 2, alcoholism and violence. And 3, not being very good with the kid. First, let's hone in on Jack's selfishness. When Jack went on the interview to be the caretaker of the Overlook Hotel during the winter, a job that required him to be at the property for about 5 months from late October to mid-May, he was warned about the isolation and was told about the tragic murder-suicide that happened to a family that were the previous caretakers after the patriarch suffered a mental breakdown from the isolation. And Jack's absolutely okay with this because he needs the solitude to focus on his new writing career. When the general manager interviewing Jack asks how the family might feel about being in isolation for 5 months, he quickly speaks for his wife and young son, saying that they'll love it there.
But your wife and son, how do you think they'll take to it? They'll love it.
But will they? In the scene prior to the interview, Jack's young son, Doc, expressed to his mother with some sadness in his voice that there's hardly anyone to play with around here.
I guess so. In a way, there's hardly anybody to play with around here.
At their current residence. Then Wendy talks about how hard it can be making new friends. What this tells us is that Jack clearly isn't in tune with the needs of his family, especially his own son, as Danny's looking for companionship with other kids, yet he signs them up for 5 months in isolation at what we'll later find out is a haunted hotel. Now, even though Jack might not have been privy to this conversation between Danny and Wendy, he should have known that his son has an imaginary friend, Tony, which Doc says lives in his mouth. But again, he doesn't consider the needs of his kid, only that his need is to write in peace. Let's pivot to the second reason why Wendy should have left Jack long before going to the Overlook. And this is a big one. It's unveiled that when the family lived in Vermont before moving to Boulder, her husband, Jack, was a frequent drinker, aka an alcoholic, who actually dislocated their son Danny's shoulder in an aggressive drunken state one night when he was just 2 years old. So not only is this man selfish and puts his own needs above his family's, but he also has a history of being very violent, abusive, and struggling with addiction or alcoholism. And it's not that this fact is lost on Wendy. In fact, she's the one that told Danny's doctor about it. Yet she moved across country with this man after he hurt their son instead of leaving him. Danny is clearly troubled from this event, as Wendy notes to the doctor that the first time she noticed her son talking to his imaginary friend, Tony, was around the time he was injured by his father, Jack. Let's go back to the point of Wendy's emotionally abusive and toxic relationship with her own mother. One might summarize this traumatizing event that happened to her son is not that bad in Wendy's eyes given her upbringing. She even refers to this event as just one of those things. Like, oops, he was drunk and not in a good mood, so it's just one of those things that happens. He's not going to do it again. The last reason Wendy should have never been at the Overlook and should have left Jack long before then is how Jack treats his own son. Again, we are focusing on the events that occurred before arriving at the hotel and Jack becoming possessed by ghosts. In the car ride to the Overlook is when we first see Jack's interaction with his son. It isn't very loving or kind, it's rather cold and grim. When Danny looks to his dad and says that he's hungry, Jack just responds,
"Well, you should have eaten your breakfast."
To which Danny looks at him and rolls his eyes. We know, Danny, we know. Then Jack proceeds to tell his son Danny a wildly inappropriate story for a 5-year-old to hear about a family of settlers who were snowbound and had to resort to cannibalism to stay alive. Wendy knows Danny is too young to hear this and tries to prompt Jack to dial it back, but Jack thinks that it's okay to tell the story because his son has seen similar things on television. Even though she shouldn't have been there in the first place, Wendy and her 5-year-old son find themselves secluded at the Overlook, witnessing firsthand Jack's mental state completely declining during their stay. He's having full-on conversations with ghost bartenders, is having affairs with naked ghost women, threatening to murder his family with an axe, and actually kills the head chef, Dick, who came back to save Wendy and her son after receiving telepathic messages from Doc. Total chaos. Thankfully, Wendy and her son escape, and Jack freezes to death in a hedge maze. So, thoughts on this movie? Was it the alcohol mixed with the isolation that caused Jack to go crazy? Or was it really the evil spirits and ghosts he became acquainted with that drove him mad? Leave your theories below. And as always, if you've enjoyed this content, please like, share, and subscribe for more. Signing off now, your friend, Dom.